You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
All right, welcome to episode 20 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. Yeah, we have a lot going. 20 episodes. It's hard to believe that we've made it that long.
6 months into it.
Yeah, I know. That's incredible. But we've got a lot going on this week. We've got Donald Trump with the Space Force. So dun 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 dun, dun or whatever it's quite amazing. They're going to be separate but equal with the Air Force.
The memes out of this have been the best.
Yeah, that's but we're gonna roll into that in a bit. We also, on a much more serious note, we have Greg Finan from the Dahlonega Nugget who's going to be joining us in a bit. He's got an update on the Rainbow Family Gathering that's happening up in the Chattahoochee National Park in Lumpkin County, up just north of Dahlonega. There's been quite a few allegations of abuse up there. There's been a lot of talk about usage of public lands, and we're going to clear a lot of that up tonight. So we have that discussion. We'll be having him on the phone shortly. We have this week's Loser of the Week, which we're quite excited about. And also, we have in national news and local news, this past week, Donald Trump has signed an executive order changing the immigration issues with the children being separated from their families at the border, and there's been a lot of turnabout going on from Trump supporters because of that, and also here in Atlanta for reasons that seem to be making the left feel good, but don't really amount to anything. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has stated that Atlanta jails are no longer going to house ICE immigrants. Or ICE detainees. I don't know what that has to do with any of this, but let's get into that.
Well, I want to go back to his executive order for a second because I think that we'll by the time this airs, this will be on the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong Facebook page, because all of the news articles that I read, regardless of where they came from, nobody actually linked to the press release. They just summarized in whatever direction made their argument look good, whether it was, see, Trump really cares, or whether it was, see, Trump isn't actually doing anything, or whatever it was. None of them actually linked to it or copy-pasted the text for people to read. Did you guys read it?
Nope.
Okay, I'll send it to you. Cut that out.
Here it is.
So, if you read it, all he's doing is authorizing Congress to take action and it's in Congress's court now, which is basically what Johnny Isakson and Ted Cruz have been, quote, rushing to do in the last, week or so since all this press happened. And personally, we've had this discussion off air about how is this a response to something he said wasn't happening, or, there were so many different responses from the administration, and there was a lot of denying, and then they were saying it was the Democrats' policy, and this has always been practiced, and then, also it's still not happening. And then all of a sudden we end up with this executive order, and it's a whole lot of something for nothing. And I just find it odd that this is the response, and that no one's actually talking about it in its actual text, because Congress was already trying to act. I mean, they were emergency pieces of legislation.
The whole thing is just a lot of political spin. It's difficult to know what to believe, because there's so much there's so much BS coming in from all sides on this issue that, I don't really know what's happening. What I do know is that the Trump supporters have went from we've got to enforce the law must be enforced, to thank God Donald Trump stopped this horrible problem that Obama created.
Right.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit, and I've really thought about it more after I said it, and I just truly believe that we're not dealing with, when we're talking about supporters, we're not talking about political supporters anymore when it comes to Trump, because he was a celebrity, and I think we're dealing with fans, and fans are just a different animal altogether.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, it's
Well,
it's the nature of the beast.
and he's definitely sticking to his gun, so to speak, for the law is the law, because the executive order says that, you know, Jeff Sessions will seek a modification to the Flores Agreement, which is from the 90s. And it says that they'll keep families together to the extent that they can legally do so. And right now, they're only allowed to keep families for 20 days. So if they keep the parents past 20 days, these children are still going to be taken somewhere else. So, again, this hoopla and this praise for, thank goodness he hasn't really done anything except put it in writing that there's nothing he can do.
Well, and that has kind of become just par for the course for Trump, is just kind of this ability to do nothing and have people believe that he's done everything, that he's resolved a problem.
Right.
It's just incredible. But
I will say though, I mean, I didn't vote for Trump, and he's not my guy, because aside from, no matter how many things he may do right, I hate his attacks on the media. I mean, I despise the mainstream media just as much as everybody else, but that doesn't mean that he should do the things that he does. And so I really struggle with him. But when people go the way they do on social media and just like take this to the extreme and compare what's happening to Auschwitz and blame it on Trump and all of this, it's so infuriating, because I never wanted to defend Donald Trump. And I'm like, I've basically just taken a back seat on national politics anymore, because there's no one's right anymore and no one's listening. And this is just the latest evidence of that. I mean, this whole thing, we don't have a darn clue what is actually happening at the border. None of us do, because you don't get real information.
right. And I mean, it's one of those things where it's what do you do with that? You don't have you don't have information. You don't know what to believe. Everybody's spinning things to their own narrative. I mean, really, the only thing that you can do is watch the right wing news, watch the left wing news. Kind of see what matches up, and just kind of assume that the things that match up are true.
Or you can go with Alex Jones and just be ticked off all the time and know that as long as you're if you're ticked off, there's probably a reason to be. It just might not be the reason he's telling you.
I'm thinking we may be able to grow our views on this show if Matt would start doing shirtless rants where he begins to cry in front of a webcam.
You know what, though? I mean, look, if you want to grow viewership, I'm not the one that needs to be topless.
Well, I appreciate that endorsement, Matt, but
I wasn't talking about you either.
Well, at that point, we would have to make it a web-based show, instead of a podcast. It would need to go on YouTube.
Live stream it.
We should put a poll out and ask that, like, or not a poll, but like a question, like, what would you like to see us do to grow our readership? Because here's a photo of Alex Jones eating pie with no shirt on, or maybe it's quesadillas. I can't really tell, but it's an interview about the visit to the InfoWars studio. So, we really need to get on this for next week when we do our live show. Should we pie with no shirts on?
Oh boy, could be helpful. What do we have here? What's this in the background? We have a case of waters, expensive waters.
Hold on a second. I'm sending you this photo. Isn't it? There's a chest. Doesn't that look like a human's face on his chest?
Look at the way that's shadowed. It looks like he's like pressed up against some glass or something.
I'm confused.
This is awesome. This is the best Google search I've ever had.
Well, Matt and I can teach you some things off the air about Google image searching, but because if this is the best you've ever had, we can help you out.
Right?
No,
turn
you.
off safe search.
Yeah.
No.
Have you ever done that? Like turn off safe search? Even like the most mundane things, like water drops. Like you end up with just ridiculous amounts of porn.
That's job creation though, because somebody has to sit there and tag all those videos and photos as like water drops and peanut butter and chair, so that when you
Right? Well, like I remember years and years and years ago when my dad, he does computer forensics and IT security and things like that, and they had a dude at one of the places where he worked that was constantly getting around all the firewalls on the porn stuff at work, and my dad finally figured out that, and now we're talking 13 years ago at this point, figured out what he was doing, and he had turned off the safe search function on Google Images, and then, water, balloons, whatever. And it was returning the results that he wanted, apparently, but it cost him his job. So,
Wow. Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, whatever you're looking for is out there on the internet. That is certainly for sure. So now we kind of went off on a tangent there, but
yeah, we did.
what do we think about getting back to immigration? I mean, we've got Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, who's told ICE that she's not going to house their detainees anymore. So, what do you think about that?
I don't care. ICE can get their own detention facility.
I mean, first of all, I want to start by saying that regardless of what you think about it, it's absolutely not relevant to the outrage of kids being, separated from their parents at the border, no matter
Right.
how much we want to act like it's a response to it. But yeah, it's definitely an important time to remind people that state and local governments are not bound to enforce federal law. So there's that. Last week on last week's show, we had a brief conversation, some comments made by Matt about the Rainbow Family Gathering in Lumpkin County. At the time that we recorded, it was not quite the story that it has now become. So we are going to revisit that at this point with we have Greg Finan from the Dahlonega Nugget. He's a reporter for the Nugget, and he has actually been out there on site. And so we welcome you to the show, and we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
I appreciate you having me on.
How's it going, Greg?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
One of the things that we've been seeing a lot of reports of is we've been seeing a lot of reports of police activity going on with the U.S. Forestry Service, as well as the Lumpkin County Sheriff's Department. What can you tell us about what you've seen and what's going on out there?
All right. Well, from what I've seen, it's been less of a local law enforcement presence out there, but there are a good number of U.S. Forest Service officers out there. The very first day that I went out there was this past Thursday. It was only the second day that most of the seed camp, which is the beginning people, normally it's a group of about, from what I've been told, it's a group of about 50 to 60 people that always come in first. They set up most of the basic infrastructure. So when I went there on that Thursday morning at 10 a.m., I was greeted by 4 Georgia State Patrol cars at the end of Forestry Road 28-1, which is what they're off of in the Chattahoochee National Forest. I was asked to show my license. They told me to pull over to the side. A minute later, they told me I could go, that they thought I had a violation, but I could go. I didn't really notice anything Friday and Saturday because I've been making it a habit of going out in the area just to kind of police it in my own respect, just to see, all the entranceways in, what the police or U.S. Forestry Service presence was. And it wasn't until Sunday afternoon that I actually ran into the very first roadblock or license checkpoint, as they like to call it. At which point I was just waved through, but I had noticed that there were several vehicles that were already pulled to the side. They were searching the vehicles, etc. I don't really know the, details of that situation. So, being a newspaper person, I really can't comment on that kind of stuff. But what I can tell you is that there are a large number of U.S. Forest Service agents out there. And at the time on Sunday, they far outnumbered the actual amount of Rainbow Family Gathering people that were in the woods. I think it's kind of evened out at this point. But also at this point now, the U.S. Forestry Service agents are now deputized by Sheriff Stacy Gerard. So now they're actually out on the main roads as well. And yesterday I actually went through a checkpoint. And as soon as I got on the main road, not even a half mile down, I was then pulled over again by a U.S. Forest Service agent. So, and pretty much had to stand on the side of the road for about 45 minutes before they would let me go. Had to contact my publisher and also had to contact the local law enforcement to let them know that I was a reporter and that I was supposed to be there. So, that's the what I can tell you about the presence and how many are out there. I think right about now it's probably starting to even out because there are more people starting to trickle in. But I do understand that the main influx isn't supposed to happen until the 29th or the 30th of this month.
Right. Everything I've read about it says that the height of it tends to be right there at the 4th of July.
Yeah, the festival actually is scheduled between July 1st and July 7th, with the focal point, yes, being the 4th of July celebration, where they observe silence from sunrise to noon. And then that silence is broken with a resonant om and a big circle and a prayer for world peace. And then the children's parade starts and the children come out in parade fashion singing Give Peace a Chance by John Lennon.
Wow. That's
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wasn't expecting that. Everybody's got their own thing, but just I wasn't expecting that level of hippie. Not that justifies anything going on out here, but
well, from what I've been told about the actual history of how this entire thing started, and you can look online and see things, but until you actually talk to some of the people and actually get some of the backstory, you can't really believe what you see on the internet so much. But supposedly in 1972, part of the counterculture, segment of our nation, mostly made up of Vietnam veterans, decided that they wanted to start something where they could enjoy the national forest, enjoy the freedom of being in the national forest, but also celebrate the 4th of July in a way that would not remind these Vietnam veterans of war. So no fireworks, no loud explosions, essentially just this prayer for world peace.
You bring up a really interesting point regarding the use of public lands, because I know that was a specific concern that Matt had brought up regarding what happened, damage done to these public lands during this festival. So I didn't know if you could speak to that as far as what you've seen thus far and what you've heard from other sources and whatnot.
Yeah, what I can say is this: we have a Facebook page here in Dahlonega called "Say What You Want Dahlonega," and it's kind of a Facebook page for people to rant and rave about certain things. And there have been several photos that have been put up, and these are the stereotypical photos that you'll see in pretty much every newspaper article about the Rainbow Family Gathering. And our own locals have debunked some of those photos. They were photos that were taken from stories that did not even have to do with the Rainbow family. And some of the photos were photos of their cleanup process. And one of the last parts of their cleanup process is they stack all the bags of trash that they've collected. They work there from the middle out, collecting all the trash. Then they stack all the trash by the side of the road. And then they go one step further by going through all the bags of trash to get out the recyclables. Then from there, all the recyclables are bagged up. All the trash is bagged up. They're put onto the tops of buses and vans, etc., and transported out of the area. Now, we talked to the editor of the paper in Oregon where this took place last year, and we also talked to the forestry representative in that area about the cleanup process that happened. And the editor of the paper actually told us that, it was a lot like this, where there was a lot of hype and a lot of fear to begin with. And he said when it really came down to it, it was a very peaceful event, and past a little bit of petty crime, a little bit of rise in petty crime, things like people leaving stuff out and it getting, missing. Other than that, they said it went pretty smoothly, and they believed that it was more hype than substance in the long run. But also the park ranger had told us that, yes, in the main meadow, there is a sign. There are still signs that, there was a big gathering there, but we're talking thousands of people. I think 6,000 people attended last year's national gathering. So when you have 6,000 people in a main meadow, the grass is going to get trampled on. And so you will see signs of that. But they said that the native grasses have been reseeded there. And by this time next year, there will be no sign that they were ever there. But that they did have a clean bill of health when they were checked out by the park rangers. And that's another thing I want to mention is that some people have been concerned about in National Forest, you're only given 14 days to camp for free as a citizen. And that's in any national forest. But what they don't understand is that the Rainbow Family Gathering actually works very closely with the park rangers and the U.S. Forestry Service. They have gotten a permit to have this event. They have their own operational plan, which tells everything that they must do, down to their clean water, their latrine trenches, etc. And from what I've seen, because I went out there before anything happened, when it was just marked off, to get those before pictures, because my plan is to cover this until the very last day, be there for that checkout, so I can put those before and after pictures together, and really tell the story. And at that point, if it comes that, things are destroyed and they didn't say what they were going to, I think it's at that point that we should judge these people, because to me, what I've seen in there, it just looks like a family vacation.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
When it comes to, like, specifically with the permits, according to the Forest Service, they don't get permits.
Yeah, see, that's a tricky situation. They have changed. Now it's something like creative environment something instead of calling it an operation plan. They used to give letters to them at the end of every gathering from the Park and Forestry Service, giving them that clean bill of health. And in, I think, 1998, they stopped giving out those letters because it was almost like an endorsement for them to do it again the next year. At least this is the stories that, I've gathered from the many people that I've talked to out there. So that's That's one of those. That's one of those legal questions that the U.S. Forest Service really isn't, I guess, as forthcoming as what's really going on as.
Well, if you go to they've obviously got an entire section of their webpage dedicated to this, and then there's a frequently asked questions section, and number 10 on that section is, did the family get a permit? And every answer on there, that it is a single word answer of no. And then they in another question they say that when they're talking about how the sites are selected, the Forest Service says that the specific location and time typically is not revealed to the Forest Service until it happens.
Well, actually, before anyone even went out there, and before they made their announcement, and then they went out there. So the timeline here, I guess, is maybe different than in the past.
Right. That's what it's starting to look like, because they make fun of me on here quite a bit because I'm a big advocate of public lands. Like I'm a hunter, I fish, I hang out on a lot of it, and my concerns with it are kind of just some of the general concerns. One, I don't like that they're not playing by the same rules that I have to play by. And then I do have some concerns over when you put that many people into a concentrated area like that, it wrecks things. And
I guess in a certain way, what I could tell you is this: a couple years ago, I did a story on interesting places to do outdoor activities in and around Lumpkin County. One of the places that I looked up was this area and this part of the national forest. Bull Mountain has 26.2 miles of bike trails. It has 30 miles of hiking trails. It has all these things to it. And I was like, surely when I go out there, I will be able to take pictures of people doing all kinds of things. I will tell you, I walked out there for 5 hours for that story and never saw one person. So I guess the thing I would have to say is, in a certain sense, I am actually kind of happy that someone is actually utilizing that, if that makes sense. So,
right.
Yeah, and it's and that's kind of moving back a little bit to the whole deal with the notification and the permit. I mean, it's right now we're as we record this, we're in the third week of June. The main part of the festival is scheduled for 2 weeks out, and they're already out there. So I have a difficult time, getting down with the Forestry Service stating that they have no advance notice when they're already out there on the site 2 weeks ahead of the actual festivities. And right now, as you're stating, there's the Forestry Service people are outnumbering the Rainbow family people. So it's a difficult statement for me to swallow that there's
You're right. They do seem to contradict themselves a little bit. I'm reading a little bit further here, and they're talking about why does the Forest Service cooperate with an event. And
I will tell you this as well. I personally saw, and they weren't allowed to go on record because they have to be anything they say has to be done through a PIO or a public information officer. I did see, though, on their second day actually in the woods, Forest Service workers, park rangers coming out and working in conjunction with them. There were concerns about a few trees that the Rainbow family thought, were in bad condition and probably needed to be taken down. And I firsthand saw the park rangers come out, let them know that we handled the 2 trees that you were talking about over here. The other ones we're not going to be able to take out. So that was their second day in the woods. And so from that interaction that I saw, I felt like there was already communication between the 2 sides on what was happening and what was going on.
Right.
Yeah. And what I noticed in your article in the Dahlonega Nugget, Greg, that there was mention of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. What is their role? Are they still out there in heavy force, or are they just?
Yeah, no, they're not really out there in heavy force. I would say the majority of what you see out there, law enforcement wise or officer wise, is the U.S. Forest Service. And I will tell you, you know, I've been out there every day since last Thursday, minus today. I'll be going here after this interview, but every time that I've gone out there, I have been followed by a Forest Service vehicle. They followed me to where I parked. I hiked in. I went and talked to a bunch of people. I took photos because I'm trying to document beginning to end, because we really want to get the real story. A lot of the things that you read on the internet seem to be slanted very much one way. We're trying to really do our due diligence as, you know, watchdogs of democracy, and we're trying to get both sides of this story. And from what I've seen out there, it seems that it's a very heavy presence for what seems to be pretty peaceful people. I've seen some things that I'm not sure if they were legal. I've heard some stories that I have actually started to investigate a little bit further, and I've actually put in some open record request acts to get body cam footage. So what I can say about the presence is what they say. And these people have been doing this for now 46 years. This will be their 47th annual national gathering. And I asked them all, do you expect a police presence? Do you expect the U.S. Forestry Service to be here in numbers? And they said, yes, we always expect that. And so then I asked them, well, in all of your time that you've been coming to these things, how would you describe what you're seeing here? And it's amazing to see how many of them say this seems just a bit excessive, especially with what it is now. This festival is set up into 3 different stages. So the first stage is what you have happening right now, and that's what's called Seed Camp. So about 50 to 60, and I think maybe it's around 70, 80 people out there as of yesterday. These people come in, they build the kitchens, they build the main stages, they build the kids' villages, the women's villages, the LGBTQ villages. They set up all these different areas. They set up the med vacs or the medical areas and all that. So they're essentially there right now just to set up the basic infrastructure so that when the influx of people come in at the end of June and July 1st, that it'll be sustainable to handle that many people. It's actually for a non-organizational, a quote unquote, as they say, non-organizational a group. They are very organized and they know exactly what they're doing. So the ingenuity that you see out there with their problem solving in a natural setting is, to tell you the truth, quite amazing. I mean, I'm an avid camper, and some of the stuff that they were rigging up with like their water filtration systems and stuff like that are things that I would have never even thought were possible while camping. And a lot of people call these people dirty and stuff like that. But if you're actually out there and seeing what they're doing right now, it's a lot of dirty work. Digging sanitary latrine trenches is not clean work to do. But it seems that they have done a fairly good job of setting it up to where when they leave, it'll be fairly simple for them to clean up. And I will tell you this as well. The Ranger camp is right here. They do their training in that area, and blanks, spent shells, such like this. Second, third day that I went out there, they had these people that are doing the seed camp had buckets and buckets of the trash that they had already picked up, and these shells that hunters leave and the blanks that the military leave out there. So the cleanup process actually began on the first day that they were out there. They're cleaning up the local community's trash right now.
Man, that is you're painting a very different picture than the one that I got, through the various, because I'm a member of several outdoor groups that are nationwide, and they've dealt with the Rainbow Family in their national forest, and specifically a couple of years ago when they were in Ocala National Forest down in Florida. So it's you're definitely it sounds much better than what I had previously heard.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we've had a lot of locals that have gone out there, and I've actually interviewed some of those locals that have been out there, ran into them and stuff like this, and a lot of them are pleasantly surprised as well, because again, all they could do was the internet research on who these people were. Most of our community had no idea who they were, so I had to stop my internet research on this group strictly because I started to notice a trend that all of the stories that were written would have like one new piece of information, and then the rest of the article would just be regurgitated bad incidents that happened in other articles. So after you read that lead paragraph and started to get into the story, you had already read that story before somewhere else. Again, that's why we're trying to not just give one side, we're trying to give both.
Right. And, I've noticed that too in some of the reading. I was talking to them last week about it. I was like, it's between 10 and 20,000 people. Apparently that 20,000 number came from one gathering they had in like 2000. And since then it's been closer to 6,000 or 8,000 is the average.
Yeah, and I actually asked them what they were expecting number-wise, and they said they're really expecting about 4,000 people. And they said that will include the locals that they expect to come out too, because they say every year that they have these, a fair amount of locals come out and camp out there as well, just to, kind of figure out what's going on.
Right.
So they're really just expecting 4,000 people. They're not expecting the 20,000. And I actually heard that the last biggest one that they had was about 15 years ago, and it was about 13,000 people. But they say that they're not expecting those kind of numbers this year.
Right. So
because it's the first year that they've done it in Georgia.
Right. Now you said you're going out every day.
Yes, sir.
Are you? Can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
If I drive up Saturday, can I go out with you?
Sure.
All right.
Definitely. I'm actually, I've been asked a lot of times, because a lot of the locals know that's what I'm doing, that I'm going out there and I'm talking to these people and I'm seeing what's going on and I'm documenting all of it. And a lot of them have asked me what my first impressions of these people are. And I will tell you honestly what I've told them. When I first drove up, the very first day that I drove up, I was greeted at what they're calling a welcome area. And it was a little campground, about 10 people sitting around a fire. They all stood up and they all yelled, "Welcome home." They waved me into where I could park. When I parked, they asked me if they could help me get anything out of my car. When I got out of my car, they all proceeded to give me hugs and tell me that they love me. So that was my first impression of these people. And really, in all honesty, in everything that I've seen out there, not one time was I fearful. Not one time did I think that I needed law enforcement to take me in there with a bulletproof vest. Because we were told that by putting me into that area, we were risking my life. And we were told that by the U.S. Forest Service in a
Really?
press briefing on the.
I don't look. I would have had to have laughed at that myself, because, like, if you were to ask me to make a list of violent people, hippies would not make that list at all.
Yeah.
I mean, my 85-year-old grandmother would be on that list before a bunch of hippies.
Yeah. And it's actually funny because everybody is labeling them as hippies, and yes, that may be sort of their ideology, but I don't know that term really applies very well, because all the walks of different people that are out there, you have professors, you have attorneys, you have doctors, you have fire EMT, you have road hands, you have all kinds of different people with different professions out there. And you engage conversation with any of these people, and you're going to have an intelligent conversation. So, I don't know that term as we know it and as it was developed back in the 60s really applies to what they're doing. Everything evolves, society evolves, and I believe that their thinking has evolved as well in some sense.
Right. I guess I tend to think of I guess I don't use the term hippie in that 60s, 70s sense. I call my wife a hippie because she believes in essential oils and chiropractic care and things like that.
I traveled cross country with my girlfriend for 6 months tent camping, and from some of her odors at times, I could have called her a hippie too.
Right.
So, just to kind of wrap this up, I know that I think one of the prime differences is you're referencing Portland last year where this was held, correct?
Yeah,
Idaho, I think.
The exact place it was in Oregon.
Oh, it was in Oregon. Okay, so so of course,
Oregon. I don't think it was Portland area. It was, I believe the town started with an M.
But it was in Oregon, which of course the biggest difference there is that we are dealing with, for lack of a better term, we're dealing with hippies, and marijuana is legal in Oregon and it's not here. And I think when you really get down to it, that is probably what all of this excess law enforcement is really all about. So I suppose my question is, based on what you've seen out there and all of the, and everything that's come out, have you seen anything with the ACLU, any of those types of groups? Have they started coming out and watchdogging? Have you heard whether or not they intend to?
I do know that the ACLU has been contacted by a few people. I do know that there are some stories that are circulating about CPS coming in, about unlawful searches maybe. And again, as a newspaper person, I really can't say whether this is fact or not because we're still investigating this. But some of the stories that we have heard, obviously we have thought have been serious because, again, we have put in an open records request for body cam footage of some of these, of all the officers that did certain checkpoints at certain times in the past few days based on some of the interviews I've done. And I did all these interviews the right way. I took essentially 3 witnesses and the actual gentleman that was involved in this one situation. I interviewed them all separately, told them to tell me their story in their own words. And, the way they told the stories were different, but there were so many consistencies about certain things that I couldn't really ignore it. And then when I actually talked to the gentleman who was a victim of this alleged unlawful search, this was a grown man that, as he was telling me the story, I could see him reliving it. I could see anger. 3 different times during him telling me this story, he broke down in tears. This is a gentleman who was shot 5 times, has a one leg, and a messed up arm. And he was, from his story, it seems like it was enough to make us want to investigate further to see whether or not some of these claims are true.
Yeah. And, and we'll definitely be following that and your continued reporting out there. But, we definitely do appreciate your time and coming on with us tonight. And I know
thanks, man.
I know you're excited about getting out there tonight. So,
yeah, actually, I've been told, so tonight is the summer solstice. This is what they call their regional gathering. So that original group, that seed camp group that's in there building the infrastructure, this is where they have their first real celebration. They celebrate the summer solstice. So I'm kind of interested in seeing, because it's supposed to be like a mini version of what we'll see on July 4th. But July 4th will obviously be on a much greater scale. but I will definitely take you up on that if you're in town on Saturday. I
Yeah,
mean, I would
what time are you going to head up there? I'll drive up from Atlanta Saturday morning and
yeah,
meet
I mean,
you.
just get my information from Jonathan and give me a call, and whenever is good for you is good for me. I mean, Saturdays are my day off, so I'm kind of just doing this as my due diligence as a reporter. Won't be getting paid for it, but I'm definitely urging everybody in our community. I'm definitely urging other media to not stay outside of the gates, to not be parked on a different mountain than where they're at, to actually go in and see what's happening instead of the fear-mongering clickbait type headlines that are out there where, it'll say Georgia County fears rainbow gathering in the Chattahoochee National Forest, but yet in their stories, they don't have one quote from one local that ever says that they're fearing anything. Actually, the only quotes that are in those stories are based on press releases.
Right.
So I'm definitely urging anybody and everybody that can. And as they say, if you have a belly button, you're invited to come. And if you don't have a belly button, you're also invited to come. So I'm definitely urging it because I actually think it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to see people living in a different way and to have a different philosophy and to actually be enjoying the national forest, which I think a lot of people kind of take for granted and maybe don't visit as much. So, and with the whole trash issue, I'll add one more thing with the whole trash issue is that here in Lumpkin County, the Dahlonega Nugget for well over 2 years has been writing story after story after story about the roadside litter in this county. There's organizations and there's volunteers that go out and try to clean up our roadways, and before they're done cleaning it up, it's already dirty again from the amount of litter from just the locals. So
Right.
it seems a bit hypocritical in some sense for some of these people in our community to be talking and judging these people before they've even gotten a chance to be judged, if that makes sense. When our people here can't seem to keep their fast food bags and et cetera inside their cars when they're driving down the road.
Well, all right. Well, we definitely do appreciate you, Greg, and we
I appreciate it. And
on.
like I said, all of you, if you want to come, I'll definitely be more than willing to take you out there. And I'll go through the checkpoint. You guys don't have to show anything.
All right. Well, we certainly do appreciate you coming on with us.
I appreciate you.
Right.
You have a great evening.
You too.
You too.
So, Space Force, what do you think about that?
Space Force. So, I mean, all
I can do is laugh at it.
I can laugh and I can hope that they draft people from the General Assembly to go. Because otherwise, like, you're just sitting here wondering, we have so many problems. We're spending so much money other places all around the world. And now we need to dominate space. I mean, those were his words. We need to dominate outer space.
Right. I don't know, man. I'm like, how did we just decide that's ours?
Well, not only that, but we're going to make this a branch of the military.
Right.
Like
180 nations on Earth, and we went, you know what? Space is ours. We're going to dominate it.
And then, like, the responses, I mean, there's been a lot of people who are upset that, understandably, they're like, well, why can't we take care of our veterans, but we can go to space? And then there's some on the left that are like, we've got this immigration crisis. Why are we talking about going to space? And then you Google this, and articles like from PBS and other, typically left-leaning organizations are talking about how it was a premature move, but it was inevitable. And,
it must be, I don't know, maybe that's the legacy he wants to leave, because I don't think he's going to get his wall. So,
yeah, I mean, his quote was, "When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. we must have American dominance in space. We are going to have that Air Force, and we are going to have the Space Force. Separate but equal.
Isn't separate but equal? Isn't that like the justification that they used for basically the Fourth Amendment violation of segregation?
Yes. I mean,
I just think that's an interesting term, especially from a guy. Like, I could see how me or you or somebody in our age bracket could possibly get away with using that. But he was alive during segregation. He was in school. He remembers when it happened.
right.
So I mean, I don't want to get off on this whole thing of he's a racist or some other nonsense like that. But I just find that's a very interesting choice of words from a guy who would have known.
I mean, personally, I think it was a bad move. If you want to, the thing about Trump is like, even let's just say Space Force is a great idea. Let's just say it is. Okay, well, you just ruined it by saying something controversial.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he can never just stay on topic and just make his case. He always has to throw something else in there. And what is even more interesting, and I didn't know this until I started doing some article research on this, Congress is the only branch that can create a new branch of the military. So, and the Pentagon has already said they're against it, or they're reluctant, not against, but reluctant. So, I want to be like, who did you speak to other than, what was it, the National Space Council? Who did you speak to other than them about this before you went and said you're going to sign an executive order?
Right.
So,
I don't know, man. I there's a guy in my office who has this theory that Trump does these things to capture people's attention, to get them to focus on that, while he goes and does something else.
100%.
So I guess
that's how
it's an interesting theory. I'd be curious to see what comes out of what's going to happen in the next few months while everyone's worried about Space Force.
Well, everyone on the right is saying, oh, well, he just says these controversial things and he's getting all these other things done while we're arguing about this. And everyone on the left is like, oh, it's all unscrupulous activity and we should all be terrified and shaking in our boots. But again, it's not anything new. I mean, regardless of the intentions or the story behind it, all of our levels of government do this. I mean, just look at the legislature. They pick a few controversial things at the state level. We all talk about them. And in the background, unless you're watching every bill that's coming forward, it's the same nonsense. It's the same.
Right. They're shoving through.
Right. And they do it at the local level. While you're talking about the millage rate, they're changing policies internally for financial practices. And so while I don't know what his intentions are, I don't think that that's an outlandish theory, because it's constantly, hey, look over here while we do this over here. And
right.
Yeah, Space Force.
Space Force. I don't know the memes though. Good Lord, the memes.
They're fantastic.
Have you seen the one that's like the Space Force and the Reserve Space Force?
No.
All right, so it's top and bottom. So on the top you've got Darth Vader, and it says Space Force, and then on the bottom it's got Rick Moranis from Spaceballs in the big helmet.
Mm-hmm.
It says Reserve Space Force. I laughed my off at that.
Let's go ahead and let's cover the loser of the week. Who's excited? I know everybody's got to be excited. It's a big week. A big loser. It's a big, huge loser of the week. The nominees were Chris Severe, Chris Carr, and Matt's nominee, Robin, last name unknown, unpronounceable, the head of DHS. And our winner, coming in with 90% of the vote, Chris Severe.
Not surprising at all.
Chris Carr did get a few votes. No one cared about Matt's DHS pick.
I told you that would happen, though.
So who are we nominating this week? I'm nominating Donald Trump. Only because I'm too fat and too old to join the Space Force.
So I'm going to take Greg's word for it at the moment, and I'm going to nominate the U.S. Forestry Service for being less than truthful in regards to this rainbow family gathering. It's even evident in their frequently asked questions. They kind of contradict themselves a few times in those answers. So I'll nominate the Forest Service, which I guess that falls under the purview of the Department of Agriculture, who is headed by Sonny Perdue, who was a Georgia governor.
Right. Well, and
just to bring it back to Georgia. Here, so.
And let's not forget that Sheriff Stacy Gerard up there in Lumpkin County has deputized these guys.
I wonder if there's like some, Forest Service biologist or whatever that's up there, and he's like, he's the reason that there's this talk of these Fourth Amendment violations because he looks at trees and stuff. Now suddenly he's told to search vehicles. He's over there trying to figure it out based on Starsky and Hutch and Bad Boys.
Yeah. Step out of the car. Remove those clothes, ma'am.
I don't know, from what I understand, you may not have to say that.
Yeah. Jessica, you know who I think you should nominate?
Who?
Alex Jones.
No. What did he ever do to you?
Actually, I have had interactions with Alex Jones, but we'll let that lie for right now.
I have two. Okay, I'll nominate him because do you know that in 2012, when the Chicken Man died, he stole my story and stole some of my content and didn't give me credit for it?
Now, see, I don't have that problem. You can actually go to InfoWars and find an article written by me that he sourced to me.
Well, he didn't source to me.
See, that's just...
So I'll do this once a month where I will nominate someone as the only woman on the show. I will nominate someone for something they did several years ago.
I think that once a month syncs up with something else, but
Wow.
Hey, look, I haven't been offensive this whole show, at least not to you. Mm-hmm. Well, really, I haven't been offensive at all, but definitely not to you. Usually I get that jab in the first 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. But we went an entire show.
You've angered her. She's over there.
So do you want to remind people about next week?
Next week, you can join us on Wednesday, June the 27th at 7 p.m. at the Dry County Brewery in Kennesaw. We'll be out there podcasting live from the Dry County Brewery. in Kennesaw, Georgia. We'll have the information on our Facebook page. We'll have an event set up, so go ahead and click that event and let us know you're coming so that we can know how many are going to be there. We'll be there answering your questions live. We might even have an extra microphone set up so that if you have some interesting things you'd like to say on the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast, or a question that you've always wanted to ask us, you'll be able to do so. So that's Wednesday, June the 27th at 7 p.m. at the Dry County Brewery. Yeah, at the Dry County Brewery in Kennesaw, Georgia. Jessica's mom may be there, we hope. That's one of our celebrity special guests that we're hoping to facilitate coming out. We'll have Jessica's sign on hand, so that'll be there. And a lot of fun to be had, a lot of beer, and it's the day after my birthday. So, might have a party.
How old are you going to be?
I will be 29.
29.
29.
Oh. When's your birthday, Jessica?
July.
July.
And how old will you be?
29.
We should totally do a 30th birthday bash for Jessica.
So do we have any closing thoughts this week?
I'm done.
You're done. I would just like to remind everybody to show up at the, if you'd like to see what this show looks like live and in person and what we see every week, then I would strongly suggest that you join us in Kennesaw at the Dry County Brewery on June the 27th at 7 p.m. So, there you go.
Right? Oh, hey.
What?
These were our opinions and not necessarily those of All on Georgia.
Yeah. Except for Greg's opinions. His are the opinions of either him or the Dahlonega Nugget, but not All on Georgia. I'm just kidding. Those are not the opinions of the Dahlonega Nugget. Those are solely the opinions of Greg Finan. So, Matt, enjoy your Saturday up at the gathering. I do hope that you'll post lots of pictures onto the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong page after the show releases. So, but all right. So,
along with a recording of Jessica's snort laugh.
That'll be there. All right. So y'all have a great week, and we will see you next week.
Later.